Greetings and welcome to episode 12 of the Transform podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio, and this is Tuesday, November 23rd. For all the listeners here in the States, I know you guys are getting ready most likely to celebrate Thanksgiving holiday this week, but we are not resting on our laurels. We are still publishing here to our podcast. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We will have another episode for you later this week as well. So we're on our 2-a-week schedule there. What I want to talk to you guys about today is Instagram stories. Okay, so as you can tell, a lot of the episodes that we go into, we're usually focusing on a particular tool or strategy or tactic, and we're trying to give you some practical insight or tips or advice into using that tool or that strategy or that tactic. So today is no different. So let's start all the way at the top level and just talk about why Instagram. So, we've actually addressed in a previous episode why Facebook, and using Facebook as sort of an anchor point with your Facebook business page and running Facebook ads and so forth, and all that being understood. And also taking into account the fact that Facebook owns Instagram, and so there's sort of a family of applications there, it's sort of a natural flow down to publish your content on Instagram as well as Facebook. Okay, so there's just sort of a familial relationship between the two applications. Okay, now Instagram, at one point, until it appears now TikTok has overtaken it, was like the fastest application, if I recall correctly, to 1 billion users. Okay, just, absolutely, taking the world by storm, so to speak, when it debuted, I believe, in 2010, and eventually being acquired by Facebook and so forth. And so Instagram is an incredibly important application simply because of how many eyeballs are on it, and, sub to that, the demographics that are on it. Okay, so if you're talking about the coasts in the United States, users are going to range up into their 40s, late 40s, mid 40s, etc. on average. If you're more towards the middle of the country, it's probably more like 30s, mid 30s, high 30s. So there's a particular demographic there. There is a lot of eyeballs on the platform. There's a lot of ways you can express yourself on Instagram that we're going to obviously talk about one of them today in terms of stories. But there's a lot of powerful tools on Instagram that we won't necessarily get into today. I'm going to just sort of tick them off here for you. But the visual nature of Instagram, the storytelling ability that comes through Instagram, the eyeballs that are on Instagram, the demographics that are on Instagram, the support via Facebook, and so the ad kind of functionality that comes with Instagram, you can't ignore it. That's not to say it's for every business to be there and be on that platform. I'm not going to just prescribe that writ large to 100% of our listeners here, but I think you have to have a serious case against it to not be there. Okay? So there has to be a very compelling reason as to why you're not on Instagram, just as a general rule. Okay? Now let's kind of talk about some of the things you can do with Instagram, then we'll really focus on stories to finish things up in this podcast. So obviously you have the news feed, and this is the same thing that you see on Facebook, just a scrolling feed of posts that are presented to you no longer chronologically, but in sort of an algorithmically decided way, right? Based on other content you like, or how many times you like certain accounts, or where you seem to focus your time, that's where you're going to get that attention to pop up in your feed in terms of who you're seeing and whose posts are showing up and stuff like that. So there's the standard news feed, and you can accomplish a lot there, guys. I mean, in a news feed post, it can be a single image, it can be a carousel of images, up to 10 of them. You can show video clips in there where you have a preview of it before somebody watches the rest of the clip off the feed. So there's a lot of versatility just in the news feed, because of the fact that you can go still image and video, and you can also go multiple still image. Okay, captions are very powerful if you have really rich, detailed captions, good hashtagging. So the news feed alone is a powerful aspect and the main feature right now. There's talk of changing that, but right now for Instagram. Okay, then obviously we'll get into stories last. an emerging and interesting thing about Instagram that we will cover in a different episode, but probably not too far down the road, is Instagram Reels. Okay, so Instagram Reels is Instagram's answer to TikTok. And so Instagram Reels is an attempt to develop short-form content that is very digestible. It's very, it's very quick. So we're talking usually like within a minute or so, that kind of thing. And it basically, is a way for you to be highly creative, where we're talking about like, setting your content to music, just kind of getting a little bit, crazy with it, being very, highly informal, things of that nature. Okay. So basically Instagram Reels, the interesting thing about Reels is that because of the rivalry with TikTok, Instagram Reels is getting the most organic reach on Instagram. So in other words, without having to pay for the content, without having to pay for the traffic, Instagram Reels is really getting, it's getting favorable treatment, let's put it that way, by Instagram. Okay, so you definitely want to be learning how to make Reels. We definitely will talk about Reels in a future episode. Okay, but we want to kind of start with the building blocks here, and we're going to start with obviously stories today. Okay, so you have the newsfeed, you have Instagram Reels, and that brings us to stories. Okay, so stories, and in a lot of ways, it's funny thinking about Instagram and the way that it just sort of cannibalized other platforms' features, because Instagram Stories in many ways was an answer to Snapchat and its capability to make messages disappear. So on Snapchat, users would be posting to the platform and messaging and so forth, and those pieces of content would disappear after 24 hours. So it was not permanent. You didn't have to live by it 20 years later or anything like that. And so what Instagram did is to kind of answer the popularity of Snapchat back in 2016, it created stories. And Instagram Stories last 24 hours. So you post the stories, it goes away. You can save stories to highlights, a section called highlights in your profile, and you can memorialize them there. So if you have a really good Instagram story, something you want to maintain or keep on the record, or have users refer to frequently, they can go into your profile and they can select from that row of bubbles, so the circular icons below your profile, and they can click through there and they can watch your stories that you've saved there as highlights. Okay, so we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment here, but let's talk about 8 different things that Stories allows you to do and to accomplish in terms of reach and effectiveness and storytelling and so forth. Okay, so the number one thing that I would say to you guys is, and here's the thing, guys. So one thing before we get into these tips is that the nice thing about Stories is, as you use, I'm sure if anybody's used Instagram, you're used to seeing all those bubbles at the top of the screen. Okay, the nice thing about Stories is, again, from an organic reach perspective, different but similar to Reels. Obviously there's different ways that Instagram processes this information, but in a very similar sense, they promote your stories by simply listing them at the top of the screen and allowing users to discover them, as they are. In other words, you're not getting sort of algorithmically decided upon in the news feed, okay, where you might or might not show up in somebody's feed, even if they subscribe to you. With Stories, you have that top of feed presence, that as long as you've made a story, you're going to show up at the top of your followers' screen, where all those bubbles are listed, and you can swipe to the left or the right and move them back and forth and search through them. So you're going to get into the top section, if you will, of your followers' Instagram screen just by making stories. Okay, so there's a really powerful organic aspect to that that cannot be ignored. Okay, and so that's a key part of this that I should have mentioned right away. Okay, so that's just right off the bat, that tells you need to be making stories because you're now going to be seen more often. Okay, so let's start from there and let's drill down into these 8 tips. So tip number 1 is to be authentic. Okay, so basically the nice thing about Stories and the disappearing nature of Stories is that you can be a bit more informal there. Now, whatever goes in your newsfeed, obviously you can go back and delete newsfeed posts. Okay, they go into your grid in your profile, and they sit there for people to come and take a look at whenever they want to come look at your profile. And you can delete them, but generally speaking, if you're posting to your feed, you should be thoughtful enough that you're going to leave that item there. And it should be a rare case that maybe you're going to come back in and delete it. Okay, but with stories, it's fleeting. It's obviously going to come and go as it is, and so you can open up a little bit more there. You can show who you are, show who your brand is, show, what your business does behind the scenes. In many ways, I like to think of Instagram stories as a pillar of the whole know you, like you, trust you construct, right? We've talked about this in at least a few other episodes, but those are the stages to acquiring a long-term customer, right? They have to know you, they have to be aware of you, they have to like you, meaning there has to be some affinity there. Right? If they're turned off by you or your content, they're almost certainly not going to buy from you. And then they need to know you, like you, trust you, and the trust kind of engenders the long-term relationship because they believe they can return to you for that product or that service over and over again, or from time to time, with very high confidence that that is a good decision for them to do that. Okay? So being authentic and being very real and raw in your stories helps bring that through. Now, obviously, you want to be, at least generally consistent with your brand. You don't want to do anything so crazy that you're going to, lose tons of followers or anything like that. But think of stories as just an informal, sort of raw documentary type format that you can, get your brand or your product, your service's story, okay, lowercase s, published. Okay, so it's very important to note how authenticity can come through your stories format on Instagram because of the short-term nature of it and the fact that that's what people expect. I mean, they don't go to stories for perfectly curated content. They know what they're getting when they go in there, okay? All right, so second tip is use, in a more specific sense, so we talked about being authentic, but use Instagram stories to target certain topics that are, unique ways to talk about your business and its story and its origin and all that inside the stories format. Okay, so you can really kind of share some details there. You can be very interactive with all the different tools and, obviously it's very friendly to video, so you can do a lot of video content in there. You can have interactive polls. You can have links out to other sites. I mean, there's just so much functionality there that you can channel your brand and your business's story through. You have to consider using it for that, I think. When you step back and you say, okay, what's our brand's story? What's our business's story? Chart that out, and then I guarantee you there's a way to place it into Instagram stories that will very effectively proliferate that message. Okay? So the next thing is that's often overlooked. I mean, people don't really think about this, but the full screen format that you get with Instagram stories is very important because in your news feed, obviously, you have this sort of square or nearly square area that doesn't fill the entire, let's say, iPhone screen. I mean, for example, I have the iPhone 13 Pro Max, so it's 6.7 inches corner to corner. But in an Instagram news feed post, I'm not using all that real estate. Okay, but in Instagram stories, I'm using that entire length of that screen where I can feature, obviously, if you're filming a person, you can get their entire image into that frame fairly easily. If you're doing products or some kind of dynamic presentation, you have more room to work with. And so that's really a very effective aspect of using Instagram stories is to take advantage of that full screen format. Okay? So next tip we're going to go to is adding text to encourage action. So basically, as I mentioned a moment ago, there's so much functionality within stories. There's so many different things you can append to your story that one of the obvious ones is text that gives the user, the viewer, instructions on what you'd like them to do. Click here, swipe up, visit our website, check out our new product. I mean, you can basically pair your imagery, your videos, your stills with text, and that's very powerful to bring the two together, make it dynamic, make it interactive, and draw people in. Okay? Next up are customer testimonials. Now, when you think about customer testimonials, remember, when you have a customer give you a testimonial, the best kind of testimonials are very raw, they're very uncut, they look they basically look and feel like a home video. I mean, if you see really, like the most effective testimonials, I mean, studies have shown this, are ones that actually look unpolished. Okay, when you have really slick, really polished testimonials, people don't think it's a real person. They don't think that that testimonial is authentic. So the more raw and the more grainy and the more unpolished, just throwing out a couple adjectives there, that the testimonial is, the more effective it is. Okay, so that is perfect for the Instagram story format because that is where that kind of content resides. So you can go ahead and you can just get, hey, you tell your customer, hey, just shoot a quick video of yourself. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care. Just make sure that the message is clear and send me the raw file. And boom, now you take that video file and you post it to Instagram stories. You get 10 of them, for example. You post 10 clips in a row and you have a big sort of super cut of all your user testimonials. It can be very, very powerful to do that and string all that kind of testimonial together and do it in a way that's highly authentic and just raw and uncut. Okay, so anyway, keep that in mind, guys, when you think about doing customer testimonials. Another tip and a really interesting way to use stories, and the fact that it has this natural left to right progression where you're tapping the right side of the screen and that's how you move panel to panel to panel, is to use that kind of flow and use that linearity to create tutorials, right? So you can have, okay, so let's say your product has a sort of a 5-step use case to it, right? So you have, story panel 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 showing each of those steps. And so a user can come along, maybe you go ahead and store it in your highlights, so it's always there for users to say, oh, okay, this is where I can go ahead and I can watch this story highlight on how to use this product optimally, and it's going to lead me through these 5 steps. So boom, they pull up the story, and they tap through it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they get all those steps strung together, and it's now memorialized in your profile, and you can absolutely rely on that now to guide your users and guide that response that you're hoping to get from your user base. Okay, so it's a really interesting one there. So we talked about another tip, tip number 7. We talked about text and using it dynamically to sort of direct people and drive them in certain places and so forth. Is the non-text additives to stories. We're talking about stickers, we're talking about links, we're talking about polls, all the little different fun things that you can do. I'm sure you've seen it if you do have Instagram and you've looked at stories. Maybe you haven't necessarily published your own, but you've looked at stories. You know that these are the types of things that really bring a story to life. It's not just, let's say, image, 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 or video, 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 video. I mean, that can be effective. I'm not saying that doesn't work at all, but when you add these other elements to it, little text narratives, links out to websites, take this poll, take this quiz, answer this question in long-form, text format. There's a lot of ways that you can drive engagement by doing that. And that's really the big thing, is when you drive user engagement into your content, that is simply going to be rewarded by Instagram. Okay, so you absolutely have an opportunity there when you use all these tools to draw in users and get them to interact more with your content. So that's really the purpose of it in a practical sense. I mean, it looks fun, it looks pretty, but you're really trying to bring people onto the page, onto the screen by putting that kind of stuff in there. Okay, so let's finish up with tip number 8. When you go into Instagram Stories, you're going to see sort of like a side panel of options. You're going to see, a create function where you can type out text, and you have Boomerang is another function that's in there. You have a hands-free option where you can literally just set your phone up, go hands-free, and now you can record stories content without holding your phone. And let's say you're recording video that way, and each video will spill into the next story panel, so you can just sort of crank out hands-free video that way, and each panel becomes, or each segment, and I believe it's 15 seconds, but I have to go back and check that. So you have these little 15-second chunks that become panel after panel after panel after panel when you go hands-free with your video. So there's just a lot of functionality there that can also, in addition to the stickers and the text that you can append, that can kind of jazz up your content and create different modes of usage. I mean, obviously, if you go hands-free, for example, versus holding the phone, that's going to create a different effect. You can just type out plain text. I mean, you can go into the create function, and you can literally have stories that are just pure text. Lots of different fonts, lots of different coloration that you can use there, so on and so forth. So anyway, guys, that's, kind of a high-level look at at the different ways that you can utilize and get the most out of stories. And I really, really encourage you guys to take a look at this. If you're using it already, there's probably ways you can use it better. If you're not using it at all, hopefully you take away from this that it's something you should be using. And if you're not on Instagram at all, you definitely want to go ahead and give that decision a little bit of pause and say, okay, is that something that I really should be continuing to do, or should I find a way to use the platform? Okay, so hopefully this was helpful for you guys. As we come up with, or we contemplate more tactics for you guys to utilize through stories. Obviously, we'll revisit that in the podcast. Wanted to kind of use this episode to sort of wrap it all together and give you guys a sense of, at least as of today, the different ways you can use stories. The thing about these platforms, as they chase each other and compete with each other, is they're always changing. I mean, they're always adding features. They're always adding new little doodads and and gadgets and so forth to it. Not that those are the right words for it, but you understand what I'm saying. Basically, there's always something evolving and changing with this sort of, with this sort of tool, such as Instagram or a platform like Instagram. So obviously, as those things come up and those things emerge, we will be bringing that to you guys and giving our perspective on that. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here, guys. About 20-minute mark. We want to thank everybody for listening to our podcast. This is super important to us that you guys check in here and follow us and subscribe and like the podcast and share it. It means a lot to us. So go ahead and do that if you haven't already. Please like this episode, subscribe to our podcast so you get the notifications and when we're coming out every week, twice a week, with episodes to help you guys propel your business forward with digital and social media marketing. Okay? So once again, guys, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or you just want to reach out to us in general on social, you can come over to our Facebook page, LinkedIn, Transform. Check us out. Leave a comment. Send us a direct message. Whatever you need to do there, we'd be happy to help out, reach back out to you, answer your question, and go from there. All right, guys? So hope everybody's having a great week, real short week here in the United States, but hope everybody's well. Thanks again for listening. This is Chris Anastasia signing off, and we'll talk to you guys again real soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.